Hello and welcome to the Alamo Scenario Moment. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Brad Hathcock. Welcome back.
Hey Brad, we were just talking about Gene Hackman, because my username today is Gene Hackman's Pacemaker. And could you share with the meme that you just told me?
Yeah, so there's the one meme that has like the dog with floppy ears that is always like looking around. It's like, whoa, what the fuck is going on? And it was the meme was like when you find out that you're part of Gene Hackman's suicide pact. So good. Because as now I'm sure almost everybody knows, Gene Hackman has passed away under some really auspicious circumstances because his wife and allegedly dog are all dead too. So
Yeah. By the way, Gene Hackman, amazing actor. Pardon me. I was just watching the Royal Tenenbaums last night because this is what I do when good actors die. I go revisit stuff.
that's true, he does. I make fun of him for it usually.
Yeah, that's a great ass movie, and he's so good in it. And then, I love Mississippi Burning. The list goes on and on. The French Connection. The guy was just one of the greatest actors of his generation. So,
So I mean, I had posed a question to you and our super fan the other day, and I would be interested to see if any of our fans have a response to this of like what would be one actor, assume that like nobody's seen any movies, like whatever, what would be like one actor where you say you have to go watch all of their stuff? Like, I'm not talking like 100%, obviously, but they just put out a ton of bangers where you're like, this person is an amazing actor. And we had a little wide variety of response within our group chat there.
Sure. I mean,
And
mine was obviously Jack Nicholson, my favorite actor of all time. I think
that one's a hard one to argue. I
yeah.
mean, he's made such good films, such as A Few Good Men, which I haven't seen yet.
But he was the original
you have
Joker.
to forgive me, it came out when I was like 5 years old.
That's fine. I'm a little bit older. But yeah, I mean, going back to like The Shining and Border Patrol and all the way up through As Good as It Gets, like he was consistent all the way through.
I showed my wife The Shining. She had never seen it before, so I was like, let's watch something that like you've never seen, and it's, a great movie. I love that movie, a favorite of mine. And it was probably around like Halloween time, and I had her watch The Shining because it's not, it's not like a jump scare
Not
type.
at all.
It's not gory necessarily.
No, not really.
That kind of stuff. It's just a very well made film, and I had her watch it, and even she actually really liked it. She just thought it was a little long, but anything over 90 minutes for her is probably a little too long.
Yeah, you're never going to find a Kubrick movie with a brevity. I think the shortest one's probably Killer's Kiss, but I love The Shining so much. And I guess other actors we would say would probably be like Brad Pitt. I mean, almost everything he's ever made. It's crazy.
So we've even talked about movies of his such as Cool World, which is probably not a movie a lot of people are familiar with.
I doubt it.
But it was very much like an adult cartoon movie back in the day. It had some very dirty things in it. It was very dark and gritty. And I don't think people would look at that movie. I look at that movie as a similar thing to like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But a little less comical, I guess, in my opinion. Like, I would say it's probably a little darker than that. But Who Framed Roger Rabbit really was not a kid's movie if we're talking about it. But it was huge to show your kids because it was a cartoon, right?
It was like the first kind of one of those in like decades. Like Disney used to always do live action mixed with animation. And then they even made a ride at Disneyland. So the movie itself is very inappropriate for children. I mean, cartoons literally die on screen, so it's kind of dark. But Christopher, what's his name, is in that guy from Back to the Future.
Who played Doc Brown.
Yeah, and he's really evil.
Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah, he's really fucked up in that movie.
Isn't that when he gets like run over by the steamroller, like his eyes like start to pop out and shit?
Kids movie.
Yeah. I
But
mean, don't get me wrong. My dad showed me some fucked up movies when I was a kid. Like, I'm pretty sure I watched Caligula when I was like 14 years old.
oh boy. I mean, Caligula's not really like, it's not really like a violent movie. It's more of just it's just like a porno disguised as a proper movie. We talked about it last year, I think, because I got the
Right.
Blu-ray.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I've watched these kinds of movies and like very, very dark movies throughout my entire life. I mean, my dad, for context, took me to see Terminator 2 in theaters.
It's a beautiful
Okay.
thing.
It's a great film. Love that movie to this day. But that is not a film that you take your 3-4-year-old child to typically, right? So
Nah, people are getting stabbed by liquid metal in that movie.
he always told us this story where there was a lady who was like, "You brought your young kids to see this?" And she goes, they're so well behaved. He was like, "They're scared shitless."
Wow. This actually perfectly segues into what I wanted to start off with, which was that the Oscars were this week in the Academy Awards, and I'm pretty sure nobody watched them, and probably nobody saw most of the movies either. Do you have any thoughts on it?
I certainly didn't watch the Oscars. I don't watch award things. Like, I don't even watch the NHL awards. Like, I don't care. I just read about it. I don't care about all the shit in between or anything. Honestly, if I was going to spend 3 hours watching an award show, just go watch a movie instead.
Bingo.
maybe something I haven't seen. Like, I haven't seen Anora. A lot of people, I guess, believe it shouldn't have won Best Picture, right?
I didn't
I
have
think it won Best Picture.
I didn't have a problem with it winning per se. I thought it was a great movie, actually. I mentioned it.
Yeah, I didn't see
pod.
it yet. Yeah, you did. I'm gonna go back and watch that. You know, like I have to go back and watch Nosferatu, which is now on Peacock for free, the extended cut actually. So it's like 2 hours and 20 minutes long or something. And I know you didn't like it, but I feel like I have to watch it. But I will say I've tried so far, and I'm not really getting into it. But you know, we had a pretty decent year for movies in 2024, I think, right? Like,
yeah,
it was pretty good. But I can't bring myself to watch these like award shows, right? Because remember, like, I mean, one, there's a ton of different award shows, but two, like, remember La La Land?
yes,
And that won like Best Picture or some dumb shit for the year, and literally it was even panned by critics, I think, as just like, this is Hollywood sucking itself off.
That's exactly what that movie was. Yeah,
Like, so there's no, I don't know, there's no like real reason to watch an award because it's all bullshit for the most part.
well, I think there is some value in that. Like, good movies do get recognition in the nominations. So I finally watched The Brutalist, which is 3 hours and 20 minutes. It's like in the vein of Giant. I don't know if you've ever seen that with James Dean, and I think Rock Hudson. Similar type of movie where it's like, it's got an enormous scope and it's a very narrow one, but it's over the span of like decades. And
yeah, I want to watch it. That's just,
I thought it was phenomenal.
I know it's a slow burn movie too, so it's like a slog for 3.5 hours.
Yeah, but it does subvert
Adrian
expectations.
Brody is surprisingly a really good actor.
For sure.
I even liked him in Predators. I know a lot of people didn't really like that movie, but I, believe it or not, thought it was actually decent.
I did too.
At least for like an action film.
Yeah.
And he was in that. Now, do you need to be a particularly good actor in that? No, Topher Grace was in it. So,
hey, no. I will not have you besmirch Topher Grace on this podcast.
Defend him in under 30 seconds.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, That 70s Show, Heretic.
That's it.
I mean, he's great as like a bit actor, so leave him alone. He doesn't need it from us. So yeah, The Brutalist was great. I watched it. I apparently uses a lot of artificial intelligence. I couldn't identify where that was, which tells me AI is going to replace CG and we're all going to be better off for it, apparently, because I mean, you could always tell CG, but I couldn't see it.
I mean, hey, people are using AI to generate videos of like cats working at McDonald's. Where they're like cute little kittens putting the fries in the fryer, and
That's why you need all those data centers powered by nuclear technology so that you can
Yep.
make cat videos. And then like Dune was nominated, which is important. I watched Flow because that won Best Animated Picture. And it was on HBO. That's why I watched it, or Max. And you don't watch animated movies, so it doesn't matter for you. But it was actually surprisingly great, and I was like, wow, this is cool because like there's no talking in it. It's all these animals on a boat during a flood, but there's no talking, and it was very interesting.
I'm gonna get the name of the show for you that was also on Max. So my wife's cousin was actually nominated for an Oscar for doing the score of this like animated series, like limited series or something like that on HBO. I can't remember the name of it because, to your point, I'm not really into like those kinds of things. But he was nominated. It was, I don't know if people realize they show certain categories off air, like they don't put them on TV.
Yeah.
And that his would have been like one of those categories, but still was nominated for an Oscar. He didn't win, but I can get the name of that for you. I can never remember what it is.
Yeah, you can send it on over. Also, best documentary was the Palestinian one, which was like a very controversial choice because I think it was like withdrawn. There's like inaccuracies in it, but also one of the producers of this documentary was killed on October 7th and was never mentioned in the Oscar speech. So
Yeah, I read about that.
yeah, there's always like some bullshit around the Oscars, political stuff that I mean, really, it's unconscionable to even have that win, and to say like, oh, we wouldn't have to be here if it wasn't for like Palestinians being held down or whatever, and it's like, oh, you're on the biggest platform in the entertainment industry. Wow, yeah, you're really oppressed. I see that now.
Well, I was just reading about some of the Oscar stuff, and I guess it didn't take like an overly political tone for the most part. And then I keep seeing videos of like Kieran Culkin winning an Oscar for what was that? Something Pain,
A Real Pain.
a Real Pain.
One of my top 15. That's a great
I
movie.
know. Yeah, I'm gonna watch that. I definitely want to watch it. It looks a little depressing, and I don't find either of them hilarious enough to make it also a comedy. So
It's somewhere in between. I wouldn't say it's depressing. There's that. So, but
okay.
yeah, he won. Adrian Brody won. Who won Best Actress?
I don't know.
It was
Like I said, I
disappointing.
don't know
The woman from Menorah. She won Best Actress.
What else was she in? Because
Once
I
Upon a
can't
Time in
like.
Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
That's where
I
she's one of
now
the
I
group of
remember
like
who she would be.
the
Yeah,
Austin Butler, Sydney Sweeney, like Quentin Tarantino just found these actors and now they're all like household names.
famous.
I
Yeah.
suppose she will be too. I mean, she'll probably get roped into some Marvel project, but
Oh God.
she was great in that movie. So, unfortunately, the one of those spots was taken by that trans person who was in Amelia Perez, and there was a bunch of controversy around that, and because that person's basically a bigot, and so that person basically took away a nomination from Margaret Qualley for The Substance, which I thought was just like a crime because she was great in that movie.
She was. Yeah. That. You know what? It was actually good to see that movie get a little bit of due because
Yeah.
horror movies typically don't get their due at award ceremonies, right? Except like the Razzies, because you see a ton of bad horror movies. Um, so yeah, it's just good to see like some horror movie at least. Now, granted, this is more body horror than like slasher type film or anything like that, but that movie wasn't gory. It wasn't really gross. It just had some really good like effects, makeup, and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah,
and then quality acting. I mean, Demi Moore and
for
Margaret
sure.
Qualley both. Dennis Quaid, I mean, was unbelievable in that as that dickhead guy, like manager or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the only horror movie that ever won um, Best Picture was The Exorcist, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been
I
about
mean,
50 years.
fair, yeah, fair. I mean, that movie to this day is still considered so iconic.
Oh, it's a perfect movie.
And then they've tried to make so many like remakes or sequels or whatever that have all been dog shit.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of invented that whole category of film, and I think Rosemary's Baby was also probably nominated at some point, which is like a similar sort of like Catholic horror, whatever. But
Well, we saw that last year with Immaculate.
yeah, Immaculate was
So,
great.
I mean, they're still doing iterations, obviously, of The Exorcist, or we've seen. I mean, how many shitty Amityville horror movies? Like that was another big one, right? Like we saw the reboot with Ryan Reynolds, and then we saw so many different iterations of Amityville horror.
I think it's just cool that between both of our lists last year, we kind of covered a lot of what was eventually nominated. So like we definitely like watched a lot of the good stuff as far as what Hollywood would consider, even stuff like Wicked that you saw. So I mean,
Sure, we try. I mean, I must say I have not gotten to see a lot of movies from 2025 so far. Like I'm pretty far behind. Um, there just hasn't been a lot of like super interest, so I haven't been going to the movies as much and stuff just because I'm like, ugh. Or by the time I get around to wanting to go see it, it's already available at home.
yeah,
And I'd
we're in
have
the
to,
doldrums right now for sure.
yeah, like I'd have to pay for it at home and probably upwards of $20, but it also beats having to drive 35 minutes for me to get to a movie theater.
Yeah, I haven't been in the movies in a while since Nosferatu. I don't think there's anything coming out anytime soon that I'm gonna catch, but
I would have liked to go see Wolfman, but it's already out on
I saw it
it's out
must
on Prime.
it must have not been super well received if it got on there so quick.
I don't know. They do them pretty fast now. Like it's getting kind of out of hand. I mean, A Complete Unknown just came out like 2 weeks ago, but that movie did come out in December,
I
end
I,
of
I gotta
December.
watch that still. Yeah, let me
I think you'll like that one. That won some awards as well, I think.
if anything, it'll help me learn a little bit more about Bob Dylan, which I know nothing about. Yeah, let me pull up my diary here. Okay, so I watched Flow and I watched The Brutalist, and then I watched Sonic the Hedgehog 3 recently. Um,
Boy.
I'm
I know
contractually obligated.
you're a stan for Sonic movies.
I'm not saying they're good, not by any means. I didn't think this one was very good. Um, yeah, and I watched a couple other stuff. So, oh, actually, I watched Howard Stern's Private Parts. A mutual friend of ours uh, bought it for me as a threat. It's like you got to watch this then, and I watched that. So that movie's garbage, by the way. Howard Stern is like a piece of shit.
See, I didn't mind the movie, but that's because when it came out, I was like young, stupid, right? And
Yeah,
then you see like what he's doing today, and it doesn't make any sense. Like it's a complete 180 from who you were for 30 years, and then you just make this complete 180, and I can't, you
and
know.
they let him get away with it.
Oh, constantly. He quote unquote saved Sirius XM, right?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that movie, it's so far up its own ass. I mean, it's like ridiculous, but you wouldn't know that at the time it came out. It wasn't until I
Well,
watched it now.
it's intentional, right? Like, I mean, the Weird Al movie, the biopic, right, of Weird Al
Daniel
with Daniel
Radcliffe.
Radcliffe. It was a great movie, but it was intentionally up its own ass, and it was like intentionally ridiculous.
Well, at least Weird Al
So
is talented. I'm just kidding.
fair,
I'm
fair.
just kidding.
Hey,
Howard Stern is
actually, he
talented.
is very talented.
Yeah, yeah.
Weird Al is the greatest selling what do you what do you call it?
Artist,
Parody artists ever. And no one will ever top his parody music.
which is
It's
actually
impossible.
really good. I mean, that's the difference. It's like
Right.
really good music.
That's what I'm saying. So, it's just that movie was so far up its own ass too, but it was intentional. So is Private Parts intentionally up its own ass or not? I don't know. We don't need to litigate it because it's Howard Stern and he's kind of a piece of shit.
1.5 stars, Brad. Yeah. So okay. Well, that was the Oscars. Every year I'm gonna be interested in what gets nominated and what the
Sure.
controversies are because it's pop culture and movies, and I like all those things to a certain degree. So
Yeah, and you might find a movie that like maybe you didn't see that you're like, "Oh, well, this got nominated for whatever, an effect or score or something like that, so you might check it out."
I would have never
You
watched
know,
Flow if it hadn't won.
what's that about?
It's about a flood and a cat, and then the cat gets on a boat, and there's other animals that join along the way, like a lemur and some dogs, and it's very mystical, and nothing's really fully explained because it's a fucking cat. Like all the animals act like animals. They don't have personalities like that. And then the flood recedes, and it's like, what happened? Why was there a flood? We never know. It's not
Okay.
political at all. It's not. It doesn't have any hidden messaging in there, as far as I know, about like climate change or anything. It's just a regular ass movie. Which I suspect probably used some AI as well.
Well, yeah.
I'm 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 not sure how I feel about it when it comes to animation. I guess, but it feels like cheating. Um, would you like to delve into the politics of the moment?
Sure. What
Um,
do you have in mind?
well, Vladimir Zelensky came to the White House, and it was bad. I will say, as the person who's usually like defending Ukraine on this podcast, it was bad on all sides. He fucked up by not having a translator there. He was combative. I think part of that was the language barrier because he doesn't speak great English, so it comes off as kind of like prickish. Um, and yeah, it just was a complete clusterfuck. And now we're supposedly like going to kick out 250,000 people from Ukraine out of this country. And I don't know, man.
Yeah, I was reading about that, and I don't support that in any manner. You know, we are partially responsible for this, and like obviously the escalation and the further arming of Ukraine to continue the war, or whatever. You know, I think it's valuable to take in these Ukrainian refugees and stuff like that. It's not really a problem. I agree with you. He kind of did come in with a bad attitude, but like, I mean, you've been leading a country through 3 years of a slog of a war. I would probably have a pretty shitty attitude as well, so like, I can't fault him for that. Um,
Wear the goddamn suit, dude. Just put on a
yeah,
fucking suit.
yeah. I mean, especially you kind of have to say that too, since you hate John Fetterman, who doesn't wear fucking suits. Like you're kind of a traditionalist in that regard, so he's definitely got to put on the suit. Um, I guess what JD Vance was saying was like there was, and I didn't think I noticed this, but just like constant eye rolling and like shrugging and like all this other shit that just seemed, I guess, very unprofessional or something like that, which is part of what like set them off. I don't know.
That's part of his
I
plan.
I did find it funny also, which I wonder if JD Vance took this kind of in like as a sign of disrespect, where Zelensky kept calling him JD like directly, and I don't know if he found that offensive, as he could have called him like Mr. Vice President or something. I don't know. I'm just speculating on that, but I agree it was a shit show. But now look, I mean, Zelensky came in, said he wouldn't sign the deal unless there were security guarantees and all this other stuff. And now he's coming back and saying, I want to work with America. I'll sign the deal. Like, let's make peace. So, did it work? I mean, did berating him on national TV work? Maybe.
I will say that this does not mean peace at all. I think it just means we're getting a mineral deal. By the way, minerals that are in Russian controlled territory. It's not in the Ukrainian territory. Those mines are tapped. But
Yeah, but so again, I think I had mentioned this in the last podcast that they also potentially want to make a similar mineral deal with Russia. So if that happens, again, Russia is like the fifth largest like natural minerals or what are the rare earth mineral countries. They hold like, I don't know, the fifth most or something like that out of any country. And again, if you're looking at China as your main enemy who holds 75% of all rare earth minerals, you need to play catch up. The only way you can do that is maybe by cutting a deal with Ukraine, cutting a deal with Russia, um, in order to get those minerals. And let's not forget here, like there is trade with Russia. Like I don't believe there's an embargo on any U.S. goods to Russia, right? So
I
there's
don't
some,
know.
I'm not sure about that. We'd have to look that one up, but I mean, they've done deals in the past. All of Europe does deals with Russia, so like for energy and stuff like that. So let's not fucking pretend that it's unheard of to cut deals with the Russians. Okay.
Yeah, if anything, it lit a fire under Europe's ass. I think it's going to take them like 10 years to get where they might need to be militarily, so it's not looking good there either. But
But so that's kind of been JD Vance's point, right? Like that was part of his whole speech to the
yeah,
European Union, I believe, was this is your responsibility now. Like we can't fork over all of the money for this, which I believe the US funds something like, I don't know, 75% or some shit like that of NATO. Um, if we want to cut back spending and stuff like that, sorry, that's kind of it, right? Like we have to cut back somewhere.
I
But
guess you
also,
would sell them
also to
stuff.
be fair, we're probably going to see some GDP loss here. So, I
Well,
technically
uh,
we'd spend less money to begin with.
the tariffs went into effect on Mexico and Canada, but then they were sort of waved off because they're not going to put them on the trade agreement, the North American trade agreement. So that those won't apply to that, which is like 99% of everything. So it's again like tariffs is a negotiating tactic. It's more complicated than just saying we're going to do it, and then we always like renege on it because it's not because it's going to crash our economy. Um,
But see, so I brought this to kind of talk about it, right? Because everyone's making it seem, and again, I'm not necessarily in favor of tariffs, but everyone's making this out to seem like we are in some kind of like major trade war, okay? Um, Canada has excessively high tariffs on the United States for certain items. So I have a list of some of the tariffs that um, that they place on us, right? Now, a lot of these tariffs apply after a quota is met. So they will take those goods and they like price fix them and shit up there. But these tariffs apply after whatever quota is met. So there's like up to a 270% tariff on milk. There's up to a 245% tariff on cheese, 298% on butter, 238% on chicken, 154% on turkey, 163% on eggs, 237% on yogurt, and 70% on sausages. That's just some of the tariffs that they have on us.
so these are
Hundreds of
high tariffs,
percentages.
right? But
Hundreds of percentages.
what
Okay.
percentage? I would ask you what percentage of those make up what the market for those items too.
Yeah, I don't know because again they come after quotas. So
It's a
basically,
distinction that matters.
so basically, those companies are only incentivized to purchase up to those quotas and nothing after that because then the prices are going to skyrocket, right? So they're essentially using these tariffs to be able to like price fix their goods, like I said, and they allegedly they use it to keep low prices. But if you look at Canada's economy, inflation has skyrocketed. You only get about it's a good exchange rate if you're buying Canadian with US dollars, but if you're trying to exchange back, it's no good. Um, so like it's like 88 cents for a US dollar for one Canadian dollar, something like that. Um,
So
so
what I'm
it's not good
hearing,
the other way.
what I'm hearing you say is that Canada is a great example of why tariffs are bad.
Ultimately, yes, because they have high inflation and all this other stuff there as well. Um, I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing, but for all these people saying, well, they were starting a trade war, that's not inherently true. Canada's already tariffing us. I'm sure Mexico does as well for certain things.
I
And
wouldn't.
it's
I mean, I wouldn't be so sure. I don't know. I really don't.
Now we are seeing in Canada, the Liquor Control Board of Canada is taking American whiskey and other American alcohols completely off the shelves. But in my opinion, that's a detriment to you. You already bought that stuff. This probably isn't going to last long enough, and now you've actually just cost yourself any money by just taking it off the shelf. Like that's just not a good idea.
That's why chaos
But
is bad. Like, you react to things quickly, and if you do that, you
yeah,
shoot yourself in the foot.
I forget. I think it's I think Jon Stewart is the one that says it, and I think no, it's Bill Maher that says it, and he says every reaction here in America is met with an overreaction,
Oh,
and
yeah, that's
I
advice.
actually think that that's a very good saying. I think it's true and it's smart, because it is true. We don't just react to things; we overreact to things. Like we had the State of the Union address, right, from President Trump, and Democrats, they stood up. Al Green stood up and was like screaming and yelling and all this other stuff. They ended up throwing him out. And that's a stark overreaction. Democrats make themselves look bad because they won't stand up and clap for a 13-year-old with brain cancer that's getting like honorably entered into the United States Secret Service. It's a number of things. I can't remember the name of him, the guy that died at the Trump rally where they tried to assassinate him. Like he had that guy's family there at the State of the Union and brought that up. And Democrats aren't clapping and cheering for them. Like, it was a bad look for them. And then today they went to censure Al Green. And as Speaker Johnson was like reading the resolution, they all stood up and were singing some song to try and like drown out his words or something like that. It's petty, childish shit. It's the same from Republicans when Biden was speaking, and like, Marjorie Taylor Greene was like screaming all over the place, and
In her
just
puffy coat.
they act a fool, dude.
Yeah,
Like
they do.
constantly. They do it in all of these like hearings, like even the confirmation hearings, like everybody just wants to act a fool. And there's no like real decorum in government anymore. Like it's supposed to be like they call each other the honorable this, the honorable that. Nobody's acting honorably in our government.
Not the
Like
people that make the cameras. I mean, the ones who get the sound bites out, they're not. I'm sure
right.
there are plenty of members of Congress who are.
But it's funny because we've talked about John Fetterman here quite a few times. Um, he's crossing the aisle and like saying things, and he said like the way that Democrats made themselves look during the State of the Union was atrocious. Like it's abhorrent. Like
They
people
just look
don't
like
want to see
theater
this shit.
kids. They look
Yeah,
like Aaron Sorkin wrote out a script that's like, you're gonna have this dramatic moment where like half of the caucus is just like, they're protesting with whiteboards and their little like you're at an auction
the
sign.
little sticks, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, oh my god.
Which people are flaming that online, like they're turning around and making memes out of it like crazy, not in a good way for Democrats. It's just wild to me, man. Like this shit is just it's down such a hole. Like, and I love the chaos of all of this, right? Like, but when did they like start doing this? Where everything's
2009.
they look like children.
Remember that guy? He was during Obama's State of the Union. He said, "You lie." He yelled it. I think that was the start.
Yeah, I think I've seen that. Now, don't get me wrong. We've seen videos in other countries, like I think it was like Bulgaria or something, where I think the president was like speaking, and some guy like runs up to him and tries to shoot him, but like he gets his ass kicked. Like it's
Yeah, people
we've
fight in
seen
South Korean
wild shit in other
parliament.
countries,
It's not good though.
but no, but people look at the U.S. as obviously like a guiding light, right? Which I disagree with. I don't think you should look at politics or celebrity really as like guiding lights or inspiration, right, for what's right and wrong. But when you see calamity in the U.S. government, then every like lesser governments in other countries are just like emboldened to that, right?
Yeah,
I,
because
I mean,
we see it when we see it in other countries. We go like, "What the fuck is wrong with them?"
yeah, and it's once my mom said to me that like January 6th thing, right? She's like, that's so embarrassing, and I said, why? Really? And she was like, well, this is America, and I said, okay, we do this shit to other countries all the time.
So you're
We back
defending it.
No, I'm like we back coups, and I'm like it shouldn't be embarrassing. I said what's embarrassing is that you don't think that it can happen here. Whether it should or shouldn't is irrelevant,
It's
but
not
it can.
irrelevant.
It can.
Yeah,
And
I'm not
I
saying you're
think
wrong.
I think people need to just understand that like we don't live in a world where everything is going to be okay all of the time. And I think that's how people try to view shit, right? It's not. We are just as susceptible to all of the other things that other countries are susceptible to.
But we should aspire to something better than that.
Absolutely. But we don't.
Well, we used to. I think we used to.
50 years ago, sure.
Well, I don't know when does the pendulum swing back? I don't
I don't
know.
know, man. Because, obviously all the layoffs and everything, and I think it's something like 200,000 or so people have been laid off from the federal government at this point, right?
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
The jobs number just came out. It was like 200 some thousand more people have applied for like unemployment benefits or whatever, federal employees at least. Bill Clinton fired like 377,000 federal employees back in the 90s.
But he
And
didn't.
people want to forget about this shit up to and including the Clintons.
Well, I want to say that first of all, the federal when they did that, it wasn't done like this. This is where the public sees what's going on and they say, "What the fuck is happening? You're firing 5,000 people from USDA or whatever it was, and then you have to rehire them all back, and you don't know what the word probationary means, so you just say, "Oh, they're on probation. Let's fire them." And it's like, "Oh, that's not what that word means." There's things that are there's legalese that it's like, okay, you can't just fire somebody for poor performance if there's no poor performance, which is what's coming down to a lot of them.
That's not true. That's simply not true. At an at-will employment state, you can fire someone for any reason.
Okay, let me rephrase that.
So but see, that's the thing, right? That's one of the things that people are getting wrong here. Like the way people are fucking acting is they feel like if you have a federal government job, you should fucking be untouchable. That is just not true.
I agree with you.
The federal government is a business. If you aren't performing to your capabilities or they need to downsize, which they do, just like any other business, you should be able to be fired for any reason.
But you shouldn't. It shouldn't be that you get fired for poor performance if you're not a poor performer, which is what's happening. They're just getting that, and they're getting an email that just says you're a poor performer, so you're out. And they're like, "But I have this annual assessment where I was doing great. What happened?" Like that's not the right way to do it either.
That's the way it works.
You're saying it doesn't matter. I get it.
That's the way it works in any business. It doesn't matter. The number of people that get laid off, all this other stuff, at this juncture really doesn't matter because it has happened before and it needs to happen again. Ultimately, what they're trying to do is take us back to before COVID and like all that spending happened and the 41% of government growth, like you said, in the span of 4 years.
Who did that?
Right? Like Joe Biden.
I think there was a different Trump. President. It was
both of them.
Okay,
it was both of them.
Well, I don't want you to get away with that.
But I won't, and I appreciate that. They want to roll it back to that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone thinks the world's going to stop if we start cutting all of this other stuff, but we didn't have it in 2019. We didn't necessarily have it in 2020 the whole time. So like, this shit needs to stop. This woe is me shit needs to stop. And that's, everyone's like, well, you have to look at it like with some empathy. No, I fucking don't.
Okay, so now that you said that, I want to make it clear that nobody ever celebrated when a coal miner lost their job, at least the general public, right? Like, of course, people in media are like, learn to code, right? That was always the famous, and journalists did that.
Yeah, which apparently learn to code became racist.
Okay, so journalists suck, and we all thought that they were bad for saying that. But now you've got it, going the other way, and everybody's just celebrating that as well. And it's like, well, you know, memories are pretty long, and I think people will remember that.
Well,
Now,
people were celebrating when Biden shut down that oil pipeline, and all those people lost their jobs.
not you and I, but I want to say that, you know, like when you go out to do these protests in front of these agencies in DC and you're singing and you've got a choir, and that is like just as bad. When you work for a federal agency and then you go talk to Politico or you go talk to NPR and you're like, these are the like first world problems that this is going to cause me. That's where you hurt your own cause anyway. So like I kind of despise the way that everyone's gone about it, and it's again just like an overreaction causing an overreaction.
Right.
So it's like I got to take a chainsaw to everything, and then it's like, well, that doesn't work, but you're breaking everything, and then the people who are in these agencies that are, you know, being let go are not doing themselves any favors, and it really does make it hard. I have I'm not one to go out and celebrate any of it ever. I don't think it's great when somebody just like loses their job. I don't go out and go like, fuck yeah. Maybe journalists, I don't know. They kind of have it coming, but yeah, I don't know. That's where I'm
Okay,
at.
but so, you know, a lot of government spending is tied up in the bureaucracy of agencies, right?
I think you should
Like,
go in there. Yeah.
yeah, and that's ultimately what they're doing. Again, right or wrong,
I
you
don't
know,
know if that's ultimately what they're doing
you
though.
and I have an issue, you know, where it's like scalpel or sledgehammer. I say sledgehammer, you say scalpel. Like it, you know, it's a little bit different, but that's where you're going to see a good amount of savings is stop paying people these 6-figure salaries that they don't earn. And sometimes you have to knock everything down and build it back up.
Okay, but
Uh,
when you say ultimately, I am highly skeptical of that claim. I don't know that you'll see ultimately everything's going to be, you know, spending will be down or whatever, because
no,
none of the right things are being going after you. They're not
and they're
going
not.
like you
And
have to go after
I've
Social Security.
so I'm also criticizing the Trump administration. Right? They just passed a debt limit extension, and they just passed another bill that's going to ultimately increase the deficit, which I'm obviously not a fan of. Now, all of these Doge cuts, which they actually have taken off some of the stuff from their website that they said that they pulled because they were incorrect about those things. But it's important to know that none of that funding actually gets cut yet. None of it. And the Supreme Court even just actually held up a lower court's ruling that Trump has to actually pay out like $2 billion of work that had already been completed by certain contractors, which he was trying to hold up, which actually is his MO from when he was actually a real estate guy in New York. So that's pretty funny. But those cuts aren't passed by Congress yet. So they have to go in and do that. Now, they do have a bill out there. I don't believe it's been passed, which does include cuts to Medicare. But I believe the point of the cuts, from what I understand, is just the money that's been added to Medicare prior or post like 2019, 2020.
See, this is why it doesn't really work, because if you return to the spending levels from 5 years ago, it doesn't stop it from going up. I mean, that's
No, but
why
if they
it's
find that there is $150 billion and they legitimately find that there's $150 billion worth of fraud, don't you believe that that budget for that agency immediately loses that money and never gets it back?
in theory, but I don't believe there's $150 billion in fraud anywhere.
I disagree with you. So if you go in and send a real auditor in, okay, which is never going to happen because let's face it, again, the Pentagon has failed 7 audits in a row by real government auditors and hasn't done anything. Nothing's happened. Okay. The government's not going to audit itself. An independent auditor, probably not, because their company probably gets some kind of government kickbacks, whatever, for tax purposes. So it's going to be tough to use like a big four corporation, right? Because there's lobbyists. But if you send in a real auditor and they found that Medicare had that $150 billion, that immediately removed from your budget, you never get it back. It goes to pay off the debt. And you have to do
150 billion.
if I'm just saying that's what they're claiming, I believe was $150 billion in potential fraud. I believe that's what they're claiming. If there was that anywhere in any agency, I don't care what it is, would you be okay with immediately clawing back that money and paying off debt?
Oh, absolutely.
They will never get it back.
How could I say
in
no?
kind, because you don't have all of that money, you might also have to fire some people.
Well, all I could say is if people are misusing taxpayer money, then they should be audited and fired. Okay,
They
you got
are.
me there.
Dude,
That's not how it's. These aren't people who cause fraud.
Let's go back to see all of the COVID spending money and how much fraud was caught, including actual government officials buying boats and shit like that.
Oh, for
that's
sure.
That's fucking fraud, okay?
Okay,
that shit's fraud. So let's go back and look at the COVID spending money and tell me
should.
That's what that's 3 years of spending money, that there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud there. And you don't think that over the last 50 years, while the government's been growing and growing and growing and budgets have been exploding, that there isn't any fraud? Did you know that some of these NGOs that USAID sent money to had been established like a month before they received millions of dollars in grants?
Including Stacey Abrams.
Exactly. Did you know that?
Obviously I did, but I'm trying to tell you that, okay, so you want the government and the guy in charge to go and look at, let's say, COVID fraud, right? And there's a lot of it, and we both know it happened, and I didn't want the COVID spending in the first place. Who did that? The guy who's supposedly going to cut everything now? I'm supposed to trust him that he is going to spend all this money, allow all this fraud, let the next guy deal with it, who's not going to investigate it at all because he was a fucking corpse, and now he's supposed to be the one I'm supposed to trust to go in and do it all the right way.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you should trust Elon Musk or Donald Trump when they say any of this, because at the end of the day, Donald Trump is a politician and he lies. Like the whole Ukraine thing about kicking out 240,000 Ukrainians, that was never brought up before.
I doubt that'll not happen, actually, because
right, but that was not brought up on the campaign trail. Nobody voted intentionally for that, right? Like that was never even a thought, I don't think.
But that's not how the right views it, dude. The right views it as like he got a mandate to do whatever the fuck he wants, and it's like no.
But that's back to, kind of the whole situation, right? Al Green was standing up screaming, it's not a mandate. And that's what ended up getting him thrown out.
Well, you could wave that's just a gerontocracy and a bunch of 90-year-old people running Congress who are waving their canes, and it's all embarrassing.
Mitch McConnell's being pushed around in a fucking wheelchair.
Nancy Pelosi took a fall. She had the cane, man. Like, it's really pathetic. I'm not defending anybody in Congress. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene should be the last person to say, oh, federal employees don't have real jobs. And it's like, what do you do exactly?
Yeah, you don't. You work 180 days a year.
I mean, it's getting a little absurd, but there is a cultish behavior to this, which is that when Trump says, like, oh, we got to get Andrew Tate back, I don't even know why this is a thing, but it's like, oh, Andrew Tate has got to get him back in the country. And it's like, why are you dying on that hill? And why is the right defending that? A guy who literally raped and sex trafficked people, and they're like, well, because the people in my party believe this. They're exactly like Democrats right now. They're censoring people. They're saying you can't say certain things.
Sure.
They're advocating for bad people on their behalf. It's crazy how they overplayed every single win they got.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Biden administration let a guy who was literally selling kids into juvenile detention centers go. Like, I mean, they're all the same, dude. They support shitty people, and it's just, you have to go with it along party lines. I don't believe in abiding by party lines.
Not at all.
I don't, because I believe what I believe, and I do believe that there is a way to find common ground with people and like make reasonable laws. I do. I don't believe that we have a government that's capable of doing so, and I don't believe that we've had one in a long time.
So yeah, I just think that the last 4 years were a complete disaster. There's not one good thing that I can name, and it's already happening again. It's only been like 40 days, and I can already say nothing good has happened so far. I don't know if it will, and there are good things that do happen. If
I
they
mean, to be fair, the last time the government was all in alignment was really after 9/11, and that just stripped U.S. citizens away from their rights for the last 30 years. So,
yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. I all I could say right now is I'm standing back, objectively looking at everything that's happening, and I don't think any of it's very good. And
no,
I think maybe you do think some of the stuff is good, and so
I love the chaos of all of it. Okay, so let's not make a mistake here. For me, the chaos is king. I love it. I think it's funny
it
because
can't
the
go
way
on
people
forever.
react to all of this is so stupid. I think people need to finally start to realize that a lot of federal politics don't actually affect your life. And if you want to make a difference, you need to vote in your local and state elections because that's where it actually makes a difference. Um,
Yeah.
and the lunacy here is, I think, for me, what needs to drive people to understand like this system is not good and we need to stop the duopoly. Like, get us a third party, right? A viable third party. You know, get us something that changes the way that we do things here. And
The
it's just,
not to interrupt you, but the only viable third party is fully endorsing the Trump platform. So it's like even they've been captured now. They lost their independence over the last year,
I would agree with you.
and it's a
But
shame.
Trump is doing a lot of things that the Libertarian Party wants to see. Now, Libertarian Party is full of anarcho-capitalists and anarchists and, people that don't have a home. They don't
The
have a
island of misfit
party, right?
toys.
That's exactly what the Libertarian Party is. But so much so that there's infighting amongst the Libertarian Party about abortion, about um, taxation, about war. Like they can't agree on anything. That's the problem with the Libertarian Party.
Well,
Um,
but they all stood for free markets, and this isn't a free market administration, and I think that's where the libertarians have lost their way.
we haven't really had a free market administration in God knows how long.
This is the
Um,
opposite of that, though. I mean, they're out there saying like trade deficits are bad. Why are trade deficits bad? On the merits, right? Because the American people get to choose to spend their money the way they want. If you move an iPhone factory to America, you're not going to get a cheap iPhone. And look at what happened to that Foxconn factory in whatever it was, Wisconsin. Who works there? What do they make? Does anybody know what they actually make there now?
no,
They took people's homes, they seized the land to build it, and they don't. And I couldn't even tell you what the fuck they do there. And
which
now
is government overreach.
exactly, but that's where this all is like. We're going to bring 5 semiconductor factories to America. What does that mean? Does that mean they're going to make semiconductors, or are they going to bring parts? It's not manufacturing, right? It's like we're going to manufacture parts that are built in other places. So you're still going to bring in the parts to do that. It's just going to be more expensive. Trade
Well,
deficits aren't
we do
bad.
that here
We're the
though
wealthiest
already.
country
Like
in the world. Like that doesn't
we
mean
bring parts here for assembly.
we do. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But what I'm saying is that like when you bring up the fact that like we're in a trade deficit and that's a bad thing. No, it's not. Why is it a bad thing?
So I think one of the things that's interesting here, because we have been talking about like deficits and things like that, right? And you and I have talked about, I think the projections are to actually see our GDP shrink by, I don't know what, like
It's going to
1.6%
be
or
a
something
lot.
like
Yeah.
that, which is really high. I'm interested to see how these investments that Trump is talking about from other places affect us, right? So, like, Apple says that they're going to invest $500 billion to be manufacturing things here in the U.S. I think it was like another 500 billion from Saudi Arabia for who fucking knows what. Um, there was a company I think that said they would do like $1 trillion deal. I think the mineral rights with Zelensky once he signs is worth 500 billion or more, or something along those lines, right? So if now that's going to take time, obviously, to be put into our economy. Like that's 500 billion probably over 10, 20 years. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects us and if it actually helps keep our GDP growing over time.
Well, I will say this as well, and this is just another comparison. Apologies for the whining earlier, I guess. I have a whiny voice. You know, Joe Biden came in with the same exact ideas that he had a mandate that he was going to be the next FDR and he was going to spend money to make money. And it did not work, or it will not work. I don't know. I doubt it. And this is what we're doing again. We're just saying we're gonna set these policies, but it's not going to happen for a long time. It's going to be like a tail thing. I don't know, man. I don't think so.
I mean, isn't Apple like the richest company in the world or something like
Yeah,
that?
because they make
Yeah.
iPhones in China and not America.
Right. But, you have people like Joe Rogan who have said, like, if I could get an iPhone made in America, I'd pay more money.
But you wouldn't pay. But the regular taxpayer person, whatever, wouldn't pay double.
Sure. And that's the question, right? Is how much do these goods go up because you're paying Americans
Well, you have to do
to
it in
do the
right to
work?
work states, so you got to do it all in the South, and you have to have all the materials imported, and you have to have there's unions. That's a thing. I don't love unions,
But
but
do
that's a
you
concern.
have to get all the materials imported? I think
I don't know.
ultimately, I think that's what Trump is trying to stop, right? Like he wants everything ultimately to be made in America. That's not realistic. We live in a global economy. Um, but you know what? It's actually kind of funny because what people were kind of saying is like the trade that's been introduced amongst like the world is kind of like an insurance policy against attacking each other, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't. We used to not live in a world like that because things couldn't be made globally, and really, global trade has really only taken off in probably the last 100 years or so.
And it's a good
From
thing.
that respect, yes, it's not a bad thing, but I guess that's kind of what his point is like we can do it here in America and not have to go out to these other countries, because the more stuff we make here, the more other countries are importing. We have an import heavy economy because we are the world's number one consumer economy in the world. And I think that he wants to ultimately, I don't know, I'm not Donald Trump, is become more of an export economy. Like
It's a
send things to India that say made in America.
it's a risky bet, man, because
It is.
you know Americans import so much because we like the cheap stuff. We are the ones who decide that. I don't get a cheap thing because the government tells me like this is why it's cheap because the government was really nice to you and benevolent. And with the exports thing, you're not going to export iPhones from America. That's never going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that's never going to happen.
No, probably not.
If
And
you really want to fix it, I'm sorry. I just want to say
go ahead.
the Jones Act is a thing, right? There are things that have been in law for like 150 years. The Jones Act goes back to like the 1800s. It's about shipbuilding and protecting it. Well, if you wanted real change, you would end shit like that. That's the problem. There are barriers set up that we could address them, and we don't do it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think you're actually very correct in that we don't address those situations. There's tons of laws that are on books that make no sense. Like when Arizona tried to like revert itself to some obscure like 1800s like abortion law. It's not the same today as it was then. So we need to reevaluate some of the laws on the books that, like when they started undoing like Jim Crow and like all that other stuff, right? Like we evaluated those laws. They don't really serve a purpose. Like let's start to remove them out. And maybe that's the point of like for every one regulation, we need 10 deregulations, to happen. But that's not really what happens, right? Everybody looks at what's on the forefront. Um, yeah, I think for me, the interesting thing will be that by the time any of this could actually matter, Trump won't be president anymore. It's going
And
to take
yeah,
years for this money to actually hit our economy. Because if they are going to spend $500 billion here, you have to build the factories. Like, right? It's the same thing with, like we talked about, trying to refine Venezuelan oil. Like, it's too thick. We don't have the refineries for it. We would have to we would have to build new refineries. We have to build new factories. We have to do all this other stuff. It's going to take years for this money to actually see itself in our economy. And Trump won't be president anymore. And then who knows, maybe the economy skyrockets because we do all this other stuff, and it'll be whomever's in office will take credit for it. Because
yeah,
you always take credit for the good, but not for the bad, right?
yeah. When that GDP number comes out and it's going to be bad, it's going to be on him because every GDP number under Biden was bad and it was on him. And I actually hold Biden responsible for this number, but like kind of hold them both responsible. It's been 10 years, 10 years and two guys, and things are worse than they maybe have been in a long time.
Well, it's important to always hold the party in power responsible because, you should. They're the ones that are like, regulating and making laws and stuff like that. But it's also important to remember the past, remember whataboutism, and everybody now, when you bring up anything to bring context to a conversation, it's like, well, that's whataboutism. That just means you don't want to understand the the historical context of what the fuck you're trying to make a point about because it's a counterpoint to you and you don't like that. Like, you need to understand context, and like this has been a problem with everybody. They don't want nuance or context, they just want a clip, they want
And
a soundbite.
they're getting it. Right now the right is getting it. They're getting it good and hard, and they're winning. They are overplaying their hand, and I just want people to realize that what we do on a weekly basis on here is we look at the things as they are and say, is this good or is this bad? And right now I think most of the stuff's bad, and I would say it if it was on the other side too, as I
I'm not
have.
saying it's good. Okay, I'm not saying it's
No, you've
good
said you like the
necessarily.
chaos, and I get that.
I
I'm
I won. Like, I'm winning right now because I get to see everybody freak out.
you see, yes, you see, because the right freaks out too. And
Oh yeah.
you have to hang up that portrait of him like North Korean style, and you have to like dust it off and clean it if it gets dirty and apologize. That's how the right's acting about Trump right now, and the Democrats are gone. They had power for 100 years in this country. They are gone. They're
They
so
look
far
bad right
afield.
now, dude. Like, for Stephen A. Smith to come out and just start fucking torching Democrats, like, it's wild to see. I mean,
Clap
they
for the
released
13-year-old.
some, yeah, they like released some video of like 22 separate Democrats all in different rooms with a microphone using this same exact scripted response. And Stephen A. Smith was like, "What the fuck is this? Like, this is why you lost, because
They
you
got away
have
with it
no
for so
real
long.
message. Like, you just," and they've been exposed. And I
Yes,
can't stress this enough. That's probably the best thing that's going to come out of Trump round two is like, he's exposed them now more than their lunacy is at like an all-time high because he won. And now they're freaking the fuck out. And I love it. I love the chaos, obviously, but they're exposed for having a lack of message. I mean, you just you just had David Hogg become your vice chair of your party. What the fuck is wrong with you?
the guy
Like,
can't even write and spell words correctly. He can't even
he's
write.
never he's never done anything. Like,
I all I
except
could
be a
say is
grifter.
it's going to be like a long time before they moderate and tack back to the center, and there are 80-20 issues that they are on the 20 side of, and they are committed to them, and it's going to keep biting them in the ass, whether it's we don't talk about the trans sports stuff on here really, but 80-20 issue. You got J.K.
Yeah,
Rowling and
yeah,
the tennis player lady. They're not down with that, and they're on the left.
right. But they also like so funny enough, like CBS released the polling from obviously the State of the Union, and it was like 74% in favor of Trump.
I have a theory about that. I think that the party in power will watch the thing and the other party doesn't.
So they showed their stats. It was like 50% of watchers. Now I guess this is might just be CBS watchers, like watching it on CBS,
Yeah,
maybe. Like 50% was Republican, and then it was, I don't know, like 26% independent and 24% Democrat or something like that. So
that's kind of
Republicans,
reflective of reality. Yeah,
yeah, Republicans typically don't answer polls very much, but in this regard, they might have. Um,
yeah.
I'm not saying one way or another because I didn't see, like, you don't get to really see that data, like how many people were Republican that they asked, right? So sure, that data can be skewed, um, but it is interesting to see that it was a very high approval rating. And, in past polls, um, like they, I think CNN showed that Donald Trump has a higher favorability rating on Ukraine than Joe Biden did, and um, Doge apparently actually has like a high favorability rating in these, like, some of these polls, but again, they're polls, so you just never know how accurate they are.
People don't have a problem with you cutting fraud and waste and stuff in the government. They really don't. They have a
Yes,
problem.
the people don't, but the government
Well,
does.
of course they do. But, people also don't like Elon Musk, and Tesla's stock is down $10 again today. It continues to go down, and the sales are down across the board,
Yeah,
especially in
apparently
places like
people
Germany.
are like, people who drive Teslas, their cars are getting like vandalized and shit like that now.
Yeah, which is like, I get it.
So petty.
Put the swastika on a Cybertruck. Like, don't do that. But it's also kind of funny because it's a Cybertruck. Um, yeah, so like when you basically my hypothesis is that this administration is going down the same path as the Biden administration, and that the odious uh, thoughts and views of them, the policies, are going to impact his approval rating over time. It's only been 40 days, so
So do you think there's going to be a bloodbath at the midterms?
right now it's so
6 weeks
narrow.
in.
I don't, but the only reason I don't is because I got to see them all act. I got to see how they acted during that address to Congress. That's not a
Well,
party that's going to get a bloodbath.
so a Democrat, I think from Texas, just died, and it was like, the article was like, after Trump's speech, I forget what his name was, but it was like Trump speaks and this person like dies. It's like, okay, well, he didn't die from Trump's speech.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what you're insinuating,
you're
and
insinuating that Jimmy Carter died because he got elected.
like, come on, like, that's just not true. Like, whatever, but I mean, come on.
But you and I have been talking about those narrow majorities, and somebody on the Republican side died of brain cancer, I think. So, you got one or two seats this way and that way. You might not need an election to gum up the works at all.
And that's kind of what I'm like wondering, right? Is like, what happens to that seat would be interesting to me, because you're gonna obviously run a Democrat and a Republican. Does that seat flip?
Governors have a
And
lot of power, dude. Like Elise Stefanik is not our UN person yet because she has a seat and they need that seat for votes. So she hasn't been like confirmed yet.
hmm,
And Kathy Hochul can hold that seat up. She's a Democratic governor, but she has ways to do that. So they don't want her. They don't want to lose her vote, and they don't want Hochul to replace her with a Democrat.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that's what it is.
it's interesting how all that plays out. So I'm kind of like, I really want to see what happens with some of these seats and what happens with the midterms, but that's so far away, and we have so much that's going to happen in between.
And the way our system is set up, this is kind of what makes it the best system because you don't get everything you want, and there are breaks, and governors have power over certain things, and you elect governors in that state. So it's always a push and pull. I know it's two parties, and we don't like that, but it does work in a way where you can't just go in and do crazy shit because you think you have a mandate. You could spend. Democrats love to spend, but doesn't mean that you're gonna. It means you elect a Republican president with like a majority.
Yeah, I but Republicans like to spend too. Like, let's
Yeah,
not pretend that they don't. They just like to spend it in different areas.
They are
But
no longer conservative.
nope. At the end of the day, the interest on the debt is what it costs to fund the Pentagon, and that's not good.
Well, I don't think that spending money on a golden dome is the right answer either. So there are like spending priorities that are, I'm thinking like, wow, you could do Star Wars now. Reagan always wanted that, right? Well, if you want, satellite-based defense systems for the country, what are you defending us from? And then those are the questions I have as well. So,
China.
right? That's our main.
That's answer. It's China.
It is. It really is. Okay, so we've been going for a little bit. I don't know if you have to go to the bathroom or something, or if you're in a rush. You
No,
tell
not
me.
particularly. I'm gonna run out to the grocery store, got some stuff to buy, and then cook dinner.
Well, we already did kind of a movie talk. I will say, I got the new PGA Tour 2K25. Probably the best golf game I've played in years. Somehow, I know we don't do golf here, but we sort of do.
Even though you and I both golf.
Yeah, lettered in golf. It's a really great game, so I highly recommend anybody who likes golf games to get that one.
We finally got them.
Oh, there it
People,
is.
we
Popcorn
finally
bucket.
got them.
That's Terrifier 3 popcorn bucket for listeners. It only took
6 months.
6 months. Jeez. And now we can't even display them because it's so disturbing looking.
Yeah, my wife turned that around. It was like facing us on the couch, and she was like, "I can't look at that anymore."
Well, you texted me. Yeah, you said something like, "Oh my god, this thing," and I was like, "What thing?" And then I pulled it out of the box, and I was like, "Oh no, this thing looks
beautiful.
It's so terrifyingly realistic and weird.
It's great. I love it.
I don't. I have it actually facing up. I don't even have it facing out right now because I don't even want to look at it when I wake up in the morning and I walk out in the living room. I'm like, oh.
Thinking about hiding it in different places around my house to scare the shit out of my wife.
You should do that. I don't think maybe wait till Halloween or something, but
oh no.
I think that's a great idea, particularly in the bathroom. Put it somewhere where it's facing the mirror, so like she doesn't see it when it's in the mirror. That would be really good.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we could probably wrap it up then.
All right, buddy. I'll catch you later.
Goodbye, sir.
Peace.